So here's a video covering the functionality of the Live Boolean Master plugin for ZBrush 4R8. To start off, I have the computer case fan Boolean file here loaded in from Lightbox. And after you have the plugin installed, you can navigate to the Z plugin tab at the top here and open this up. And in here, you'll find the Live Boolean Master. So the Live Boolean Master plugin will add some additional functionality to the Make Boolean Mesh process inside of ZBrush. At the top, you'll see you have a Make Boolean Mesh button and also a switch which will automatically apply dynamic subdivision before processing. These buttons mimic the functionality that are located in the Tool Geometry Boolean area. Now, in addition to just these buttons at the top here, there's also some extra options you can use with the Make Boolean Mesh. So we have a single start option here, which will allow you to process a single start group. We have a toggle, which will allow you to make Boolean Mesh in a destructive fashion rather than a non-destructive one. And also the ability to DynaMesh the resulting model either by resolution or by polycount. So an example, let's just first toggle on the single start option here. And with my Boolean model here, I can go to the subtool palette, and you can see that this file here has two start groups. So I have a top one and a middle one here. So let's say I want to take my model and I just want to process this start group here. So I want to just go through and generate the result for this mesh, but not for the entire scene. So as long as I have a start group selected, I can go to the Z plugin tab here, and I can click Make Boolean Mesh. And this is going to go through and just process that single start group. Now you'll notice that after that has been processed, it has taken that start group and has placed it back into my original scene. So here I have the first start group here that's still consisting of all the meshes there. But then my secondary start group has now been applied, and I'm just left with one single subtool. So instead of having to append the result back to the original file and then delete the files that made up that result, this is all done automatically. So now you're just left with the single tool here of that resulting mesh. If I want to process the other start group, I can select that start group as well, and then go to the Z plugin tab, make sure I have the single start option selected, and then click Make Boolean Mesh. And this will now process that group. And you'll see that I now have both those start groups processed. I'm now left with single subtools of the results in my original file. Now, since I had the non-destructive mode turned on, I will also have the backups of those original files there in my tool palette. So at any time I can go back to those versions of the mesh if I decide if I want to edit or modify those tools as well. If I had the non-destructive button here turned off, it would not have generated those backups in the tool palette, and I would just be left with the resulting mesh. So those are the two buttons here at the top for the added functionality for the Make Boolean Mesh process. Now, in addition to this, I can DynaMesh my resulting model. So let's go back over here and select my original file here that consists of those two start groups. And now let's process this with that Make Boolean Mesh option, but now let's turn on the DynaMesh resulting mesh. So I'm going to click the DynaMesh resulting mesh here. I'm going to do it by resolution, and I'm going to keep my resolution at, say, 512. And now I'm going to click Make Boolean Mesh again. This is going to go through and process that Boolean function there, and then it's going to apply DynaMesh automatically to my model based on that 512 resolution. So after this is finished, you'll see I have my subtool here, and if I turn on my polyframes, you can see that the result is now a DynaMesh. So my model is now ready to be sculpted on. So I can switch instantly to the clay buildup brush here and start sculpting across that surface. And it's processed both of the start groups there with that DynaMesh option. So it's gone through and processed with the Boolean and then automatically turned them into a DynaMesh. So this is the DynaMeshed version here. And then if I go to the other version, which was processed without DynaMesh, you can see that this is the result. So this gave me the Make Boolean Mesh result. But you can see, since it is not a DynaMesh, if I try to sculpt on the surface now, it's not going to give me that same result that I had if I applied the DynaMesh after processing. So a little additional functionality there that will allow you to DynaMesh the resulting Boolean mesh automatically by either polygon count or by resolution. Now, the DynaMesh resulting mesh will also work with the single start option as well. So if I load in a larger model, say something like this mesh here, and this one consists of multiple start groups and contains 69 subtools. So let's say I just want to process the start group that is making up this shape here. So I can make sure I have that start group selected here. This time I'm going to go to the Z plugin tab here, make sure I have that single start option on. I want to DynaMesh the results, so I'm going to keep that on as well. And this time I'm going to do it by polygon count, and I'm going to set this to 1,000,000. And now I'm going to click Make Boolean DynaMesh. And this is just going to process that single start group now. And after this is done processing, I now should have a single subtool consisting of that result. And if I turn my polyframes on here, you can see that it is a DynaMesh. and my active point count is around that estimated 1 million mark. So it's just gone through, processed the Boolean, and then applied a DynaMesh, and this time it applied that DynaMesh by polycount, and it gave me a mesh that was close to that 1 million polys. So now I have this as my result here. It's still contained in my original file here, and it's just processed that. So if you're working with a lot of tools that contain a bunch of different parts and you just want to process them, you can use the live Boolean master here with that single start option. And this will just go through and process that single start group. And then you won't have to do any of the appending or deleting or any other processes required to get that result back on your model. So there we have that one process there. So it took those 3 parts and is now giving me a new subtool from that. So that is the quick rundown of the live Boolean master plugin for ZBrush 4R8. And the plugin itself will just add some additional functionality to the Make Boolean Mesh functions inside of ZBrush. So I hope that helps, and happy ZBrushing.